Hello.
Hi.
I'm hoping this works.
Me too. I'm gonna go get. Actually, I'm gonna just leave it like this. Like I don't have all of my lights and stuff set up, but we can make this work.
Okay, perfect. is it okay if we actually start over?
Yeah, we can start from the beginning.
I'm so frustrated because I feel like you were in the middle of answering just anyway. Well, first of all, like I said before, I am really honored to be in this conversation with you. I already was very honored when you reached out, but then once I finished reading this book, I was like, oh my goodness, like I just read a masterpiece. This is so magnificent, so beautifully told. I can tell that every word was very intentional. And yeah, I'm just very in awe of your writing, and I thank you for writing the book. Um, yeah.
Thank you for reading. I do appreciate it.
Yes, of course. So, the first question I previously asked you was about how you had previously written eight independently published books, but this is your first traditionally published book. And so I just wanted to know how you felt and how it changed you as a writer.
All right, so this is book 8, and so it's my first traditionally published
Oh,
book. And so, I mean, it's the dream. It's been really surreal for it to happen, but it is in fact the dream. Like from my very first self-published novel, hell, even before that, like my undergrad thesis from 2008. From there
mm,
is when I think the bug was planted in me that I'm gonna write a book and I'm gonna have an agent and a book deal and a big publisher and all the things, right? And I did get close with what became my first self-published book, but it didn't work out. And so once I started self-publishing, I found a freedom in that. And it sustained me for a good while. But this traditionally published with the big five, with the agent, the deal, the tour, all the things, has always been the dream. And so to achieve that has been really surreal, but also a touch bittersweet.
yeah, I remember you. Well, one, congratulations, right? But also, I remember you were saying how it made you feel safe to write on paper, or you feel safer writing on the paper. I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah.
want to butcher what you said.
The page is a safe place for me. I will often say something in writing and on the page that I have not said out loud to anyone. Sometimes not even to myself. Right? And so when it comes out on the page, it's like, oh, it's a real time way for me to process whatever emotions I'm feeling, whatever it is that I'm going through in a very honest way that then I think gives me courage to say it out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I sort of had previously asked you, and I still think we were in the middle of that conversation of, what did it cost you to write some of these lines? Because they are so beautiful. And I could tell that they come from a place of like intimate knowledge.
Mm.
Um, and so I wanted to know, yeah, what did it cost you, but also what did it unearth in you to write some of these scenes, to write some of these lines? And I'm even thinking of like the one example, when you talk about birthing. I think I had tabbed that one. Um, Birthing is rooted in feeling and emotion, timing and tension. It is reflex, base level instincts of creation, entirely ineffable. Some say God is in the room. And I don't want to read the whole thing because I don't want to spoil anything. But like some of these lines just feel like you have to have an intimate knowledge for this.
I mean, well, I have two children, so I do have
Yes.
intimate knowledge of
I
birthing, right? um,
mean,
very, very much intimate knowledge of birthing. I do have two children. Um, they were born vaginally. It wasn't a C-section. So like those experiences, like the body rendered a portal, those whole things are my experiences are the ways that I would describe the birthing experience. I wrote a lot about the Black maternal health crisis, which informed some of the themes in the novel. I'm a journalist by trade, so writing about the Black maternal health crisis between 2019 and 2022 when I was freelancing really imprinted on me. But as far as the writing itself, I let the story take me. I let the characters take me wherever they want to go. And writing this book specifically was like a fever dream. It was every morning, 5 a.m. to 6:15, writing while my daughter was in the bed beside me, right? And it was a way for me to process what I was not dealing with in my actual life. As we were trying to talk earlier on Instagram, I said, I started this book 7 days before my daughter was born. She was born June 11th. I knew my marriage was over by sometime in October. And then having to figure out how to disentangle myself from a life that I had been in for 13 years, 13 and a half years with two young children, like having to like just really tear everything down and build it back up. And doing that is very difficult. And sometimes it just feels like you're just throwing shit at the wall and you don't know what's going to stick. And I was very much there. And the only thing I had that felt tangible was this book and were these women. And so I gave them absolutely everything that I had. And I think that shows on the page.
It does show on the page. I think these don't even feel like characters to me. They feel like real life people, like with so many different complex parts. And honestly, Nikesha, you just mentioned at least three of the questions I already have about the maternity crisis, about some of these characters, and we'll talk more about them. But yeah, I appreciate you talking about some of the things that you were dealing with. Very, very hard, traumatizing things while writing this book and while writing this. So I guess my follow-up question was it difficult or cathartic or maybe both to write this during that time?
I don't know.
Mm.
I honestly don't know. Like I mean, I've said it before, like this book is a very pretty coping mechanism. I was not dealing emotionally with what was happening in my life. I was just kind of going through like the checklist of it of like what do I have to do today? Okay, I got to go to work. I got to feed the baby. I got to wash the clothes. I got to take the kid to his activities. I got to send the discovery off to my attorneys. Whatever the to-do list was, I have to read this book for my podcast. I have to do this thing. I got to write these 1,000 words. Whatever the to-do list was, I was very much doing my life, but I was not living it at an emotional level because I just couldn't. It was too much. It was just enough to just do what needed to be done to do the checklist. And the book became part of the checklist, but in the way that allowed me to express what I did not, or what I could not, or what I would not in my life. And so does that answer your question?
It does answer my question. Yeah. I mean, in a way, I am grateful that you had this to turn to.
Me too.
Like to have some kind of distance because it sounds like completely overwhelming and sort of drowning in a lot. But I'm also really sorry that you were going through that, and I hope you're in a much better place now. So I'm actually going to back up a little bit and just let's sort of dive into this book now. I'm a huge fan of opening lines, right? And I think I have this one basically printed in my head, but they cut off her head because she ran.
Yeah.
Who are they? Who is she? Who is her? Why are we running? What's gonna like what is going on? I was like so shocked. And when I read the prologue, it's just a paragraph, right? And to me, it felt like a riddle to the rest of the book. And I want to know what you hope to gain for what you hope the response to be from a reader after reading that, because I was in awe from that first line.
I want it to be WTF. like that's the response. I remember seeing this thing kind of off topic, but I remember seeing this like, I don't know if it was Twitter or Threads, one of those, but it was years ago. And somebody was talking about like, what's the craziest opening line to a rap song that you've ever heard? And somebody put out Trick Daddies Can't Fuck with the South, which starts with, anybody want to die, right? Which is like, what? Why are we dying in the first line of this song?
It's too much going on. Like, that's crazy. I might have to send you my playlist of like opening lines to songs. It's literally just chaotic opening lines.
Right. And so like, there's nothing more chaotic to me than like that opening line of Trick Daddy talking about anybody want to motherfucking die. And so when I got to my first line, I was not trying to channel Trick. I was not even inspired by Trick. But when I got my line, I was like, I think I did it. Like, I think we're comparable.
Mystical also has some crazy opening lines.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and this is also why I love opening lines so much, because you have to pull me in, right? There's sometimes where I've opened a book in a bookstore, a random book, and I'm like, what's the first paragraph? If it's not hitting me, then I'm just gonna move on. And you definitely hit the mark. I will say the other thing I'm kind of obsessed with is like epigraphs. And I like read the part of the poem from Maya Angelou, the our grandmothers. I like that line that you chose. Read the whole book, came back. I ended up writing the poem through this because I'm like, hold on, this poem is like kind of similar to the book itself. Like that was genius of you.
Everything is
So
intentional for the most part.
and I could tell, like immediately, I could tell that every word was intentional. But anyway, yeah, I appreciate that opening line because it had me hooked literally until the very end. Another line that you'd mentioned before that I have a question about is, "What is a curse but a christening by another name?" I know you wrote that. You was like, "I'm that girl." I
I
know
was
you
like,
laughed. And to me, I feel like the line is one of my biggest takeaways, which is that, ancestral art lineage sort of carries both gifts and curses, and sometimes them being at the same time. And so my question is, that was one of my biggest takeaways from the book. And I wanted to know, in terms of lineage specifically, what you also wanted people to take away from this book.
I think the two questions that I have for readers at the end of the book are, what do mothers or parents owe their daughters or children explanation of their lowest moments, of their choices, of their decision making? And then
Ooh.
do daughters in return to mothers, and children in general in return to their parents, owe them grace and understanding?
Wow.
Discuss amongst yourselves.
Wow.
That's not a conversation for me.
Yes. Okay. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm like letting these questions wash over me, but you are kind of inherently answering another one of my questions because, and I'll kind of jump around because of the way the conversation is going. But one of the things that I had noticed was there's pieces of each of these characters where we see this sort of like softened version of themselves. And I'm just gonna say Juby because I feel like she's probably maybe one of the most obvious examples, but even Gladys. Um, they all have these sort of softened versions of themselves, and then you have like something traumatic will happen, life decisions, survival, what have you, insert. And then you see them sort of harden these different parts of themselves. And that really shows up in the way that they mother, and the way that that sort of hardening shows up in how they choose to mother, or mothering is chosen for them. And I wanted to talk to you just more about that and like, let me find my actual question. I guess, yeah, just trying to understand how trauma moves through motherhood and generations and how it impacts the ability to mother. But the way you just phrased those two questions has me even like sitting with all of that at once.
So, I mean, we can think about, like, there has been research and science on this, and I am not by no means a scientist, but that, I guess it's DNA researchers, they have found how our genes and our genetic code actually changes in response to trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
so there is a legacy of slavery in Black people that is embedded and encoded in our DNA. And so if that is still there from centuries ago, think about other traumas that we experience, other things that we go through end up being encoded in our DNA. And so while that's not something that I was consciously thinking about as I was writing this book, I wasn't even thinking about it as generational trauma or even well, maybe generational curses, but not necessarily generational trauma. But knowing that that science is there and that that research and those studies have been done, when you see each one of the daughters go through what I thought of as their turning points in their life, where they became completely different from who they were before, you see it imprinted in the next generation or even further generations down about what they experience. And their experiences, I think, are very similar because they're not talking about what happened to them. So then the next generation, the generations after, repeat the mistakes of the past because they aren't reckoning with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely codified in their like being, in many ways, both like physically and spiritually and yeah, epigenetically, whatever. And even though that wasn't your intention, it sort of feels like it was, because of like how much that reflects real life.
Mm-hmm.
That's also why I was going to bring up the Black maternal health crisis, because I'm sure that it, because it reflects so much of like what happens in society, I'm sure that may have been some sort of context for this book, or things that you wanted to bring into this book, I
Mm-hmm.
imagine.
So, like I said, I'm a journalist by trade. I started off as a television news producer for 11 years. I left television in 2019. And so from 2019 to 2022, I was freelancing full time. And so when the pandemic hit in 2020, the first question that I had as far as like to pitch a story to an editor was like, how are women giving birth in a pandemic? Like, we've never done this before. Like, birthing is already hard, but how are you giving birth in a pandemic and you can't touch anybody, you can't breathe on nobody, you can't have anybody there with you? What does this look like? And so then I began pitching stories about maternal health at that time in like March, April of 2020. And between that time and until the time I stopped freelancing, I wrote something about the Black maternal health crisis. I want to say every month, sometimes multiple times a month. I wrote for the website What to Expect. I wrote for the website She Knows. I interviewed a father who actually lost his wife in childbirth while his toddler daughter was sitting on his lap. I interviewed so many different women and doctors and midwives and doulas about birthing and Black women and motherhood and maternal care deserts and all of these different things, that when I started writing the Seven Daughters of Dupree, it didn't initially show up on the page because the first draft of the novel was just Tati and Nadia's perspectives. Gladys was there, but she didn't have a perspective yet. And when the novel blew open for me with that infamous first line, I knew exactly that I was going to have an enslaved ancestor. I knew what was going to happen to her. I knew what her story was, and I just kind of had to fill in the blanks of the last three women who were Ruby, Juby, and Emma. And I didn't realize how much what I had been writing about the Black maternal health crisis had impacted and imprinted on me until I wrote Emma's chapter, where she's pregnant, George is there, Evangeline is there. And you know, that chapter kind of going along for the first paragraph or so, and then you get the line until the blood. And I remember writing that line until the blood, and it was like everything took off. And like my hands flew across the keys and poured out that story of Emma and her losses and her miscarriages and creating the curse that had befallen these women. And because it happened then, I had written all of the other chapters before. I literally wrote them backwards, even from the first draft. Like I wrote Tati's perspective first, I wrote Nadia's perspective, and then I gave them resolution. And so then when I widened the story, I kept going with Gladys's perspective, Ruby's perspective, Juby, Emma, and then the enslaved ancestor. So when the curse actually showed up in the writing, just about everybody else had been written. And so then when I put together what I call the second draft, is when I had to make sure that the curse was there, impacting some of the other women as well.
Wow. Well, first of all, I'm excited to go back and read some of the work that you've written about, because the Black maternal health crisis, obviously being a Black woman, is something deeply like passion project of mine. And just some of my my family's life experiences and stuff. So that was already like a huge part of this book, of one of the reasons why I love this book so much. And two, I'm really grateful for the work that you were previously doing, because not only was it written in this book, like I said, it feels, and the emotion is as if you have intimate knowledge of it, not even just giving birth, but like you understand all of these things. And of course we sort of naturally do that as Black women, but there's levels to this. And I think that I could see that research, I could see that passion of yours really through these pages. So I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think that like the grief was also written about so beautifully post that. Like obviously it's the birthing and the crisis of that, but also the grief in all of these women and how that traveled through. felt very intimate as well. Like I said, there was times where I'm like, I control the pace at which I'm reading, and I'm still like, slow down. Like, wait a minute. What is going on? Okay, so you brought up all of the women, and now I am curious who you felt was the easiest to write. And it sounds like you had Tati, you said backwards, right? So you had Tati first. I'm curious if because she was first, her Nadia, if they were the easiest to write,
Yeah.
and who was the most challenging, or did any of them surprise you?
Tati and Nadia were the easiest to write. Gladys was the hardest to write, only because I
Mm.
feel like I could hear them talking to me in the process of like as I was creating the novel and ideating and iterating them. And I take notes on everything in my phone before I put it on a like a Word document. Because when I do a Word document, I don't have time to be playing. I need to know what I'm doing on the page. And so like I'm always typing stuff in my phone, just notes. Sometimes I know what the project is, sometimes I don't. For this one, I knew it was for them. And so it just grew. But and so like Juby was the loudest in terms of like me taking notes about what happened. And Gladys, while she had the most to say, she always has her one-liners in the novel. She's not forthcoming about what happened to
Yeah,
her.
it's a wall up for
Yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
so for me as the author, I felt that wall. It took a
Wow.
while for me to unlock her voice. And so, like I said before, I wrote each of the women's sections separately in separate documents. So when I did Gladys's section, it was actually like 7 chapters total. And I don't think I unlocked the voice until I was in chapter 4 for Gladys of like just her section. And it's the chapter in the book that's like, they came with hot pans in hand, crooked smiles and curious eyes to see what they had heard or whatever the line is, like it's something like that. And it was that line in that paragraph that I had unlocked Gladys. And the beauty of that was because it's after what happens to her,
Yeah.
everybody else was there except the enslaved ancestor. Emma, Ruby, and Juby, Samson, they were all there. And so they all came to life in her chapter so that when I had to write their chapters, I knew who they were. I knew how they would behave, how they would act, how they would talk to each other, even if the ages were different. And so it was hard to do Gladys and to have everybody there. But once I did, it became a whole lot easier.
I think it's so unique that, like, as you're describing how these characters came to you, which, first of all, I do want to dive into that and how, like, spiritual it sounds like your writing practices. And I think that's really beautiful. But one thing that I'm finding really beautiful is that you kind of let us also have that process. Like, the way in which you wrote it is sort of like, okay, I'm figuring this out. I'm figuring out her voice. This is coming to me as a reader. So that's
Mm,
really special. I feel like we almost, in a way, had a similar experience to you writing this book
I
and
love
how
that.
things came together. I think that's so beautiful. But yeah, let's talk about this writing process because some authors do say like, this is the structure, this is my outline, this is what I want to say, right? And then it's so cool when I like see authors who are like, this is coming to me. This is coming from a different sort of place that is downloaded onto me and I'm putting it on paper. And it sounds like you're the latter.
So like I do try to start with an outline and be very structured and detail oriented. I put a video on my Instagram page where I show you all of my notes and like I walk
Mm.
you through my notes of how of the various outlines and how from the beginning the initial outline I scrapped it and then I have handwritten notes. And then once I got the expanded story, you see like a page of handwritten notes and all these different things. And I printed the notes from my phone. So like all of that is I do have that on my page. But so I do try to start with an outline and it just wasn't working because like I thought this was going to be a simple story about a girl who didn't know her father and in the end she finds him and then I'm trying to write that version of the novel and as much as I liked Tati and I loved her and enjoyed her, she was unsustainable for me
Mm.
as an author anyway to do a whole book from her perspective.
Mm.
And I mean, I know YA authors do it all the time. They're really great at it. I am not a YA author. And I was like, girl, you're not giving me enough. Let me go ahead and jump and see what your mom and your daddy and your daddy was doing. Cause they in their 20s and they was outside and you're in the house. Right. And
Yeah.
so that's really how it started for me. And then, you know, the scene in part three and from the Thanksgiving scene where Gladys says, where you know, Tati's pressing Nadia about the identity of her father, and then Nadia's pressing Gladys about why she came up to Chicago in the first place. And Gladys says, like, you know, what do you think happens to light-skinned women in the South? When I tell you, I wrote past that line, I wrote past it and then finished the first draft. And I was like, well, what happened to Gladys? And like that was the beginning where I knew that she was lingering. And I had never had that experience before with any of my self-published books. I'd never had a character linger after I thought I was finished with the novel. And so I could see her, and I could see her walking down the dirt road, which is the cover of the book. And then the vision got,
Oh,
yeah, that's chapter 18. And then the vision got wider, and I could see what was behind her. And I was like, oh my God, okay, I know what happened to her, but now what? And so it really didn't blow open until, you know, we talk about the first line. The real inspiration for that was my friend and fellow author, Disha Philia. She teaches a workshop about best first lines based off of her short story, Peach Cobbler, from the Secret Lives of Church Ladies.
incredible, incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so like I've listened to her talk about this, and I just asked myself, like, no, what would my best first line be? And so that's where they cut off her head because she ran came from. And when that line hit me, I knew what the, like I said, I knew where the story was going. And I just had to fill in the blanks and ask each of the women, what are your issues? What happened to you? What are your names? Right. And
Which I
begin
want to talk about that too. Sorry, did we cut?
and then
Yeah.
and like begin to build them out with what I asked of them, but then also the things that I was just interested in as a person, as the author. I was interested in the Great Migration. I was interested in passing. I was interested in colorism. I was obviously interested in mothering, in those things. I was interested in hair and in beauty culture and black culture and society. Nadia was always a hairdresser from the opening scene. That was always the opening scene. The three of them in the salon in the basement. And the enslaved ancestors storyline, when I got that first line, the first question I asked myself was, how would she feel about Nadia being a hairdresser? Which is why hair and beauty culture plays the role that it does in the novel. And so as I was discovering each one of the women and writing each of their stories, you had asked me, you know, who surprised me? Juby surprised me. The way that her section,
Too.
Juby surprised everybody, but she didn't, like, I knew she was always going to be the one who tried to pass, and I knew that it was going to fail. But the ending scene, one of her last scenes where she goes to make it right, that surprised me. I remember writing it. I was in Mexico with a friend on her bachelorette trip, and of course, I like I said, this book was a fever dream, so I took the computer with me everywhere. I was in Mexico. I was writing, and I remember finishing it and texting a friend, and I was like, I just finished this section. I'm uneasy, but it's right.
Wow.
So yeah,
I mean, even that scene alone, it's kind of, it keeps going back to what I'm saying. Like, okay, even obviously you did not have any of these personal experiences, all of these personal experiences, that would be crazy. But it's very clear that you have a very intimate knowledge of like human connection, of sort of human understanding. It's very clear that you're a journalist. Because the way that scene is written is so tender. And it's like you can be frustrated at Juby, whoever in that scene, for forever, but that you can't deny that tenderness that was there. In some
between
of the
Juby and
things
Logan.
yeah. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Why am I having these feelings? I don't like these people. I also, if I'm thinking about like sort of my favorite characters that I read, it was hard to pick because each of them are really special. And I was sort of torn between Gladys and Ruby because I feel like the way that you wrote about Ruby, I just wanted to like come through the pages and just take her as my own, like truly. Okay, so you mentioned a few different things that I kind of want to touch on. So maybe we can go whichever direction you want. So Great Migration, hair, or either one of those. Which direction do you want to go to?
Ew, let's go Great Migration.
Okay, because I mean, honestly, it kind of goes one and the same. Obviously I live in Chicago. I am sadly not from here, but you are. So one, I wanted to ask you about the importance of sort of like including the Great Migration in this story, but specifically, did writing about Chicago feel like a homecoming to you in a way? I'm sure it did.
It did. Like, I haven't lived in Chicago since I left for undergrad in 2004. And so I
Mm,
miss home often,
mm.
sometimes daily, when I can't
Yeah.
get mild sauce. Like, I miss home. Like,
It was
like
so Chicago. This book is so Chicago. Ugh.
and so it's my nostalgia for the city that raised me, the city
Mm,
that made me, the way that I grew up. Like, those are my stomping grounds, right?
mm,
Not exactly my neighborhood, but like a few blocks up, not too far.
mm,
And so it very much is born of my nostalgia, a homecoming in a way. My mother and my father both moved to Chicago in 1970, so they were the very end of the Great Migration. Um, and just the role that Chicago played as a receiving city. If anybody, yes, mild sauce cravings are real. If anybody has read the Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Warmth of Other Suns, where she
mm,
talks about, the receiving cities of New York, Newark, New Jersey as well, Chicago and LA as, receiving, was it 500,000 people between 1917 and 1970
I think
from the
that's right.
South?
Yeah.
Yeah. These were bustling places whose populations bloomed because of
Mm,
people, citizens running from terror,
mm,
running from Southern terror. And so I wanted to write about that. And then Chicago specifically is the home of the Defender, and Robert Abbott and the Chicago Defender were instrumental and key to the Great Migration and telling Black folk in the South, you don't have to stay down there. There are other opportunities for you and you can go somewhere else.
mm.
Now, I know we're a day after the Oscars, and the twins famously say that Chicago ain't nothing but Mississippi with big buildings. They're not wrong.
They are
They,
not wrong.
they were not
They're
wrong.
really not
The
wrong.
smokestack twins were not wrong.
They're
Okay.
not wrong. No.
And which is why someone once asked me, like, how do you, I can't get a vibe on Chicago. What is it like? I'm like, it's the Midwest. It's most of the people have roots in the South. It's down home Southern people, good manners, very Southern charm with a healthy dose of I'll beat your ass.
Exactly.
That's Chicago. Like, we are the most loving people, very
Exactly.
down home, very down to earth, but
Yep.
I will beat your ass.
And Nadia to me feels so Chicago. Like, and obviously, but like Nadia especially, I'm like, yeah, this girl is really from here
Like,
because
I
she
don't
has that
know if it made
energy.
it into the final draft, but I think in the first draft, there was a line where Tati's talking about how Nadia used to go to high school with a razor blade in her mouth. Cause
Wait, I
that's
don't
what
know.
girls,
Maybe.
I don't
But
know if it made the final. I don't remember if it made the final, but like that's part of her lore.
And the thing is, I could feel that. Like you
It's like
feel
you
that in
probably
her energy. You feel that in her energy and the way she moves. Is so Chicago. Yeah, I love this city. I've been here for like six, almost 7 years. So as you're writing, I'm like, man, she gets it. Like some stuff just be set in Chicago and it's like one or two landmarks that come up. But you made this feel like welcoming to anyone who's not from here or who doesn't live in Chicago and doesn't know the landmarks. But then if you are, it just feels even better. So I really, really appreciated that. So hair, switching over, but not really, because hair is also central to like obviously our community, but super central to Chicago. Um, so I wanted to know specifically like this why I guess that came into this book and like the significance of it. Without spoilers, of course, and why it sort of insisted on being written into the book.
Nadia was always a beautician from the beginning. And I don't really have a reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Like, both of my grandmothers were beauticians. Both of my parents are from New Orleans. And so both of my grandmothers, one lived in the lower ninth ward and one lived across the river. But they both had a wash bowl and a dryer, a seated dryer, like out back in the carport or by the garage or whatever. My mother is one of four, all girls. They all know how to do hair or what they call a standard roller set. I went to many a kitchen and basement beautician
Where?
as a child. My mother used to have a standing appointment with this lady named Rhonda. like every Friday. And this lady named Josephine used to do her nails. So like beauty culture, Black hair culture is just something that I know and that I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a third space, it's a safe space, it's a place of intimacy. Like you may not go, like, especially like with me being natural, like I may not see the girl who does my hair or clips my ends for like 6 months. But when I go and I sit in that chair, we pick up like no time has passed. And there are
Yeah.
things that you will say to your hairdresser while you are laying in the wash bowl with your eyes closed and your neck stretched back, that you may not have even said to your partner or your children or your boss at your job or whatever, right? It's a very safe space, a sanctuary space. And it's a
Yeah.
place where Black women can literally let their hair down, but also figuratively too. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to embody and imbue that in the story. And once I realized it was going to be a generational story and what the enslaved ancestors' path was, it became even more important to highlight Black hair culture and how it's been passed down or not, and the reason
Mm.
why.
Mm.
Also, the original title of this book was Hot Combs on a Saturday Night. So it was all, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I need to write this down.
That was my original title. So that's also in the video where I walk people through my process. You see
I have to watch this video. My
the
goodness.
original outline documents where you see like the little note from my notes app that says Hot Combs on a Saturday Night, and it says Nadia is a beautician and all my notes. So like that's where it really started from. Now that I think about it, from the original title, that's why Nadia was a beautician, and then making sure it stayed throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I think it resonates so clearly with the book itself, right? Because I think that hair is also, like you said, it's our like safe space, it's our third space, but it's safe in many different fronts. It's safe emotionally, physically, spiritually, ancestrally, which very much comes across through this book. And I'm glad that you said it like 20 years ago, sort of like 90s, early 2000s, because I don't, and this is not really a conversation this is sort of a tangent, but I don't think that that's the same anymore. That style of like, having a set appointment every Friday, it's just
It's
not really the
not.
same.
It's
The
not.
vibe.
It's
Yeah.
not, because like that's also in the days where you would walk into the salon and you had an appointment at 4 and they wasn't gonna get to you till 5:30. And you just knew it was part of the process.
That's the part of the
It
process.
was part of the fellowship. Now you gotta leave the deposits, you gotta schedule on the app, you gotta like
Don't wash.
read the list of rules and bylaws and regulations, or you're not gonna get no service. It's too
Yeah.
much.
It is too much. And I appreciate the nostalgia of setting it during this time when we did have that.
Like, you
um
walk into a shop and they had little books on the table, and you would open it, you would pick your style
yes,
out from
yes,
some bygone era.
it is. And I was young for it, but I still remember it. I still remember the smell of walking in. And I just, yeah, and all the
Burnt
women
hair
around.
relaxer.
It was so many women too. Like I remember going to it, and it's like at least 10 people. Now it's like maybe one or two people, and it feels a little lonelier. But yes, that's a bit of a tangent. um, okay, let me look at the actual questions. I've kind of been going off the cuff a little bit because the conversation has just been so good and so rich. Um, Oh, yeah. I think one of the questions I had sort of meant to ask previously was like more so along the lines of like lineage and ancestral lineage. And I wanted to ask you, you don't have to answer this if you're not comfortable, but do you think we inherit emotional or spiritual legacies from our ancestors? And I'm curious if you've inherited any.
Um, I think our spiritual practices are definitely passed down.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, I identify as Christian,
Mhm.
but I recognize that for Black people, Christianity is flexible
Yeah.
and that it's often syncretized with many other different kinds of practices. I think hoodoo is one of the main ones, but I also have friends who do not practice Christianity at all, but like practice Ifa or Lukumi or Candomblé, which are African traditional religions. Santeria, Candomblé, Lukumi are derivatives that are based across the diaspora: Brazil, Puerto Rico, Cuba, but
Mhm.
they're all derivatives of Yoruba and the practice of Ifa. And so seeing how my friends move in with regard to spirituality and religious space has also informed how I move with regard to
Mhm.
spirituality and religious space. Even though I do identify as Christian, I will go to church on Sunday, I will profess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, all the things.
Mhm.
I also recognize, as someone who does read my Bible, how the Bible is used as a text to oppress and to colonize and to justify harm. And so for me, as spiritual and even religious as I may be, I also see the harm of it
Mhm.
as a Black person. And
Yeah,
so it's flexible.
it
Like
is.
sometimes
Mhm.
Jesus is answering and sometimes he not.
Yeah.
You go to other things and you explore in different ways, and it has to be what feels true to you. And so, and I think some of it may have to do with, like, my family being from New Orleans. Like, we wear white
Mhm.
to funerals. Um, there are altars in my mother's house that she probably wouldn't call altars, but I recognize as such. There are altars in my house that others
Mhm.
may not recognize as an altar, just think it as a corner decoration, but it's very intentional
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Hanging pictures of the ancestors that I didn't know, the photo albums, all of these different things are ways that I have learned and grown up to connect to family and history and lineage and also spirituality and veneration and worship and all of those things. And I feel like other Black Americans do some of the same things too, whether or not they recognize it. It could be in the way you sweep the floors in your house. Do you sweep north to
Yeah.
south? Do you sweep east to west? Do you sweep door to door? Like, all of that's in there. How do you wash your clothes? Are you mixing towels and sheets? Are you, like, what are you separating out? What are you hand washing because you don't know
Mhm.
why? That's just what you do. Like, all of those things, there's a reason why, and a lot of them come back to being spiritual. As far as, and I mean, the same thing goes for like the food culture and the food ways in the book.
Mhm.
You see Evangeline preparing a table for the enslaved ancestor. You see Emma and Juby guarding their doors and marking their thresholds and their doorways. And by the end of the novel, you see Nadia preparing the same recipes
Mhm.
that Evangeline once prepared, that were passed down, that Gladys wrote out in her own hand.
Mhm.
And now Nadia is preparing them once she gets back to the land from a tin of recipes that she found of her mother's. And so all of that is very spiritual. Like, when I think about my grandmother who passed away, my mother's mother, there was a dish that she used to make. We all say that she took the recipe to the grave. And I read Crystal Wilkinson's book, the praise song for the kitchen ghosts, in
Mhm.
2023, before I interviewed her for my podcast. And it was about her grief over losing her grandmother, and how, because Crystal's such a big cook and she got that from her grandmother, she hung her grandmother's house dress in her kitchen as a reminder and an ode as when she started to cook. And I remember finishing that book, and I wanted dirty rice, which is what something that my grandmother made. We all joked that she took the recipe to the grave. And I got in that
Mhm.
kitchen. I don't have one of her house dresses, but I got in that kitchen. I said, okay, grandma, we're going to make this.
Yes.
And tell me what to do. And I had a recipe book and I did some other stuff to it. And I was like, when I finished it, I was like, it's almost there. I was like, I'm missing one
Mhm.
ingredient. I'm missing oysters, but it's almost there. And so,
Ooh, I
like,
need to try
that is,
this.
huh?
I need to try this.
And so it was, and so I mean, it's a spiritual practice, and like the way that I live my life, I think in some ways is very spiritual, even if it doesn't seem that way.
It is. I mean, I could tell you do, even in the way that you wrote this book and how you talked about your writing process. And even as our conversation with hair sort of flowed into this one, that is also very spiritual. I can't get one of the scenes, many scenes I can't get out of my head. One of them is when Evangeline is talking to the enslaved ancestor and sort of like trying to find this common ground, trying to find this common way of communicating. And she sort of recognizes her um, in I'll just say that I don't want to spoil anything, but that recognition of how she was so beautiful because it's different from her, but it's this recognition that like it's still not, right? It's still coming from the same place,
Mm-hmm.
which is very like sort of symmetrical to what you're talking about. And it is very spiritual, and I'm really glad that you touched on this because it's something that I love to see in literary fiction. The what's the word? Tropes. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people talk about like romance tropes, the one bed trope and stuff. But like there's literary fiction sort of tropes that I love, and that's one of them is to talk about these different spiritual practices, but sort of weaving them in the way you did feels very sort of like it's always been there. It's a feeling of like this isn't quite different
Mm-hmm.
from whatever we do, like what you just described. And also, yeah, thank you for describing that about your friend and also about the dirty rice recipe, which if you ever want to share that on your Instagram, let me know. Let me know because that sounds good. And I know if both sides of your family are from New Orleans, I just know y'all can throw down. Yeah, yeah, no. I really appreciate that. I think you had answered one of my final questions, which was what conversations do you hope this book starts? And what do you want readers to carry forward from this family story? That first one, those two questions, I'm still like shook about. I want to sit with that longer. But yeah, is there anything else you want readers to carry from this family story, from these seven women?
But beyond the two questions that I leave readers with, no, like
Yeah.
I said this, well, not I said this, but in my conversation that I had with Jason Reynolds,
Mm.
for like the kickoff, he was like, our we are in the entertainment business. Like, and I agree. Like, I want people to finish this book and feel like they were thoroughly entertained, that they got their money's worth, that the $30 was worth it, that, if they if their gas tank is on E, it was okay because the book was worth it. Like, I want you
Mm.
to feel like it was worth your time, worth your investment, because I don't take that lightly. So I do want you to be thoroughly entertained. Like my editor talks about the fact that, we're reading the book, it's like a mystery. We're reading it as fast as we can to get to the ending, and we know it's not going to be good, but we got to get there to find out what happens. And I was like, I'll take it. And so, as much as I love the reactions that I've been getting, where people say like, I cry, which surprises me, but I'm glad. Or like, I just had to sit in the room in silence and look at the
Mhm.
wall, or I
Mhm.
called my mom, or like, I started over from the beginning again because I had to go back and see how you did it. And like, I love those responses. I hope that it does create that kind of visceral reaction in the reader, that you feel held and kept and cared for, because in the writing, I felt held and kept and cared for by each of the daughters.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. I will be honest, like when I went in to read this book, I had my pens, my highlighters, my tabs. I was ready to take notes. And I was like, boom, I read the prologue and I was like, okay, so we're just gonna put all this aside and I'm just gonna let this story wash over me. We're gonna annotate another day. Because I had to. I like for me, there was no way I could just like I think the most that I did was like dog ear the pages, and I'm sorry if that's heresy for some folks, but for me, I'm like I need to engage with the text, right? And I could not like I literally had to let this story wash over me first. And this is a book that I knew immediately that I would have to reread. I know I'm going to reread this multiple times, and there's not too many books where I feel that way about, where I'm like, this is gonna sit with me for a really long time. And like I'm about to go back and read your whole backlog, all your newspaper, all the clippings, all the reports because I need more. And I know it's so selfish to ask for more as a reader when you've been working on this. This is a baby, right? Like you've been working on it for so long. But I'm grateful that you have more books in your catalog that I can go back and read, even if they're not the same. I think that the way you write just resonates so much with me and like what I love from writers that I want to read everything. So
Well,
yeah.
hopefully you'll see the growth in my development as a writer. If you go back to the beginning, is what I hope for. Um, yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much again for reaching out and having this conversation with me. I I can't wait for the continued success of this book because it is too great for it to not be clearing top list. It's gonna clear my list. It's already my favorite book of the year so far. So
Thank
so
you.
excited for your to see more from you in the future.
Thank you. And to everybody who came over from Instagram because the lives wouldn't let us be great. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm gonna send this to Elena. I'll send you the video and we can both cut
Perfect.
it up and post it. So yeah.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much. You have
Thank
a
you.
blessed night. Thank
You
you.
too. Good night, everybody.
Night.